The Nguyen dynasty was the last ruling family of Vietnam. Their rule lasted a total of 143 years. It began in 1802 when Emperor Gia Long ascended the throne after defeating the Tay Son dynasty, and ended in 1945 when Bao Tai abdicated the throne and transferred power to the Democratic Republic of Vietnam. During the reign of Emperor Gia Long, the nation officially became known as Vietnam, but from the reign of Emperor Minh Mang on, the nation was renamed Thai Nam. Their rule was marked by the increasing influence of French colonialism. The nation was eventually partitioned into three. Cochin China became a French colony, while Annam and Tonkin became protectorates which were independent in name only. Origins. The Nguyen family had been one of the major families in Vietnamese history, dating back to the days of the hero Emperor Le Lai. Due to a civil war and the weakness of the later Le dynasty, the Nguyen and the Trinh joined together in opposition to the Mac. Nguyen Kim, the leader of this alliance, was assassinated in 1545 by a servant of the Mac. Kim's son-in-law Trinh Kiem took over the alliance because Kim's sons were too young. In 1558, Nguyen Hoang, the eldest son of Nguyen Kim, was given lordship over the southern, newly conquered provinces of Vietnam. He ruled from the city of Hue for the rest of his life and established the dominion of the Nguyen lords in the southern part of the country. While the Nguyen lords, like the Trinh, paid tribute to the Le Emperor, the reality was they ruled, not the king. Nguyen Hoang and his successors continually expanded their territory by making Kampuchea protectorate, and by invading Laos, Kampa and many small countries in the area. The Nguyen lords styled themselves as Lord. Birth of the dynasty. It was Nguyen Phuc Nguyen, Nguyen Hoang's son, who started the Nguyen Phuc family name. 200 years later, Nguyen Phuc Coat was the first ruler of the line who styled himself king, as the Trinh lords began to do so in the north. Nguyen Phuc Anh finally united Vietnam for the second time in 300 years. He started a dynasty and styled himself Emperor Gia Long. After Gia Long, other rulers of the dynasty would soon run into problems with Catholic missionaries and, subsequently, the involvement of Europeans in Indochina. His son Minh Mang was then faced with the Le Van Khoi revolt, when native Christians and their European clergy tried to overthrow him and install a grandson of Gia Long who had converted to Roman Catholicism. This was only the start, as frequent revolts were launched by the missionaries in an attempt to Catholicize the throne and the country. Conversely, Minh Mang is also noted for the creation of public lands as part of his reforms. Emperors Minh Mang, Tu Tri and Tthc were opposed to French involvement in the country and tried to reduce the growing Catholic community in Vietnam at that time. The imprisonment of missionaries who had illegally entered the country was the primary pretext for the French to invade and occupy Indochina. Much like what had occurred in King China, there were also numerous incidents involving other nations during the 19th century. The last Nguyen emperor to rule with complete independence was Tthc. After his death, there was a succession crisis as the regent Tun Th Thuy orchestrated the murders of 3 emperors in a year. This allowed the French to take direct control of the country and eventually gain complete control of the monarchy. All emperors since Thong Khan were chosen by the French and had only a symbolic position. French colonization. Napoleon III took the first steps to establishing a French colonial influence in Indochina. He approved the launching of a naval expedition in 1858 to punish the Vietnamese for their mistreatment of European Catholic missionaries and force the court to accept a French presence in the country. An important factor in his decision was the belief that France risked becoming a second-rate power by not expanding its influence in East Asia. Also, the idea that France had a civilizing mission was spreading. This eventually led to a full-out invasion in 1861. By 1862 the war was over and Vietnam conceded 3 provinces in the south, called by the French Cochin China, opened 3 ports to French trade, allowed free passage of French warships to Campeche, allowed freedom of action for French missionaries and gave France a large indemnity for the cost of the war. France did not, however, intervene in the Christian-supported Vietnamese rebellion in Bac Bo, despite the urging of missionaries, or in the subsequent slaughter of thousands of Christians after the rebellion, suggesting that although persecution of Christians was the prompt for the intervention, military and political reasons ultimately drove colonialism in Vietnam. France completely conquered the Vietnamese in 1887 and promoted the further occupation and development of the Mekong Delta region by the Vietnamese. The Nguyen dynasty still ruled nominally the French protectorate of Hán-Nôm. France added new ingredients to the cultural stew of Vietnam. The French added Catholicism and a writing system based upon Latin letters. The spelling used in this transliteration of Vietnamese surprisingly was Portuguese, because the French relied upon a dictionary compiled earlier by a Portuguese cleric. World War I. While seeking to maximize the use of Indochina's natural resources and manpower to fight World War I, France cracked down on all patriotic mass movements in Vietnam. Indochina, mainly Vietnam, had to provide France with 70,000 soldiers and 70,000 workers, who were forcibly drafted from the villages to serve on the French battlefront. Vietnam also contributed 184 million piastres in the form of loans and 336,000 tons of food. These burdens proved all the heavier as agriculture was hard hit by natural disasters from 1914 to 1917. Lacking a unified nationwide organization, the Vietnamese national movement, though still vigorous, failed to take advantage of the difficulties France was experiencing as a result of war to stage any significant uprisings. In May 1916, the 16-year-old King Du Tan escaped from his palace in order to take part in an uprising of Vietnamese troops. The French were informed of the plan and the leaders arrested and executed. Du Tan was deposed and exiled to Reacute Union Island in the Indian Ocean. World War II. Nationalist sentiments intensified in Vietnam, especially during and after the First World War. But all the uprisings and tentative efforts failed to obtain any concessions from the French overseers. The Russian Revolution, which occurred at this time, had a tremendous impact on shaping 20th-century Vietnamese history. The sequels to the Second World War. For Vietnam, the explosion of World War II on 1 September 1939 was an event as decisive as the French taking of Da Nang in 1858. The Axis power of Japan invaded Vietnam on the 22nd of September 1940, attempting to construct military bases to strike against the Allies in Southeast Asia. In 1941 to 1945, a communist resistance movement called the Viet Minh developed under the leadership of Ho Chi Minh. From 1944 to 1945 there was a famine in northern Vietnam in which over 1 million people starved to death. In March 1945, realizing the Allied victory was inevitable, the Japanese overthrew the French authorities in Vietnam, imprisoned their civil servants, and proclaimed Vietnam independent, under Japanese protection, with Bao Tai as emperor. Collapse of the dynasty. Japan surrendered on 15 August, triggering a revolt by the Viet Minh. After receiving a request for his resignation, Bao Tai abdicated on 30 August and handed power over to the Viet Minh. Bao Tai was named Supreme Counselor to the new government. Bao Tai left shortly afterwards since he did not agree with the policies of the Viet Minh and went into exile in Hong Kong. Following the return of the French in October, the French Indochina War was fought between France and the Viet Minh, succession and heads of dynasty. In 1948, The French persuaded Bao Tai to return as chief of state of the state of Vietnam, set up by France in areas over which it had regained control, while a bloody war with the Viet Minh under Ho Chi Minh continued. Bao Tai spent much of his time during that conflict enjoying a good life either at his luxurious home in Tarlac or in Paris, France. This came to end with the French defeated Dien Bien Phu in 1954. The French negotiated with the U.S. to divide Vietnam. It was divided into North Vietnam going to the Viet Minh and South Vietnam going to a new government. Bao Tai's Prime Minister, Ngo Thinh Diem, overthrew him in a 1955 referendum that, by most accounts, was flagrantly rigged. Not only did an implausible 98% of voters support Diem's proposal for a republic, but the number of votes for a republic far exceeded the number of registered voters. Diem then assumed the position of President of the Republic of Vietnam, once more ending Bao Tai's involvement in Vietnamese affairs, this time permanently. Bao Tai went into exile in France, where he died in 1997 and was buried in Cimetière de Passy. Crown Prince Bao Long succeeded on the death of his father Emperor Bao Tai as head of the Imperial House of Vietnam, the 31st of July 1997. He was in turn succeeded by his brother Bao Thang on the 28th of July 2007. List of Nguyen emperors. The following list is the emperor's era names, which have meaning in Chinese and Vietnamese. For example, the first ruler's era name, Gia Long, is the combination of the old names for Saigon and Hanoi to show the new unity of the country. The fourth, Tthc, means inheritance of virtues. The ninth, Thong Khan, means collective celebration. Following the death of Emperor Tthc, and according to his will, this emperor ascended to the throne on the 19th of July 1883. However, he was dethroned and imprisoned 3 days later, after being accused of deleting one paragraph from Tthc's will. He had no time to announce his dynastic title, hence his was named after his residential palace as Duc Thc. Crown Prince Bao Long succeeded on the death of his father, Emperor Bao Tai, as head of the Imperial House of Vietnam on the 31st of July 1997. Prince Bao Thang, following the death of his brother, Crown Prince Bao Long, succeeded as head of the Nguyen dynasty on the 28th of July 2007. Lineage. Note: years in the table are their reigning years. See also Family tree of Nguyen lords.